All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We are looking right past those standard geopolitical headlines you see flashing on the news every single day to uncover an urgent, hidden mechanical danger that's currently facing Iran's oil infrastructure. When we talk about global conflicts or naval blockades, we almost always get bogged down in the high-level politics or maybe the immediate economic fallout. But underneath all of that, there's a very real, physical, ticking time bomb quietly counting down right now. It's this fascinating and honestly highly precarious intersection of international relations, extreme logistical bottlenecks, and the totally unforgiving laws of physical geology.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the blockade and the resulting export crash. Then we'll move into the severe oil storage crisis, uncover the fatal risks of simply halting production. And finally, we'll finish up with the desperate rail measures being taken to alleviate the pressure. Okay, let's dive into Section 1. Blockade and export crash, the immediate impact of the U.S. Navy blockade.
To truly grasp how this infrastructure crisis actually began, we have to look at a recent report from the Wall Street Journal published on April 28th. It detailed exactly how stalled war-end negotiations, combined with a U.S. naval blockade, have just drastically restricted the outward flow of oil. And honestly, the sheer scale of this drop is staggering. Pre-blockade in February, before this current escalation, Iran was successfully pushing out an average of 2 million barrels of oil every single day. Post-blockade, that number has plunged all the way down to just 567,000 barrels. Now think about that for a second. When you take nearly 1.5 million barrels of liquid out of the global export market daily, that oil doesn't just cease to exist, right? The immediate severity of this blockade means millions of barrels that were supposed to be loaded onto supertankers and shipped across the globe are suddenly going absolutely nowhere. It creates an instant, massive physical bottleneck.
Which brings us to Section 2, the oil storage crisis, the illusion of capacity.
Because when exports crash like that, the core of the crisis actually shifts away from just a simple loss of revenue. It becomes a massive physical problem. Literally, where on earth do you put all this unsold, continuously flowing oil? The system is resorting to incredibly desperate measures right now. We're seeing the use of waste tanks, temporary containers, and even just leaving the oil sitting in empty tankers floating out on the water. Now, on paper, the nominal storage capacity looks huge. It's over 86 million barrels. But we have to be clear here, that is a dangerous illusion. Due to strict safety requirements, operational limitations, and geographic constraints, you simply cannot use all of that space. Right now, land inventory has swelled by 4.6 million barrels, bringing the current total to around 49 million barrels. So while a spreadsheet might tell you there's plenty of room left, the true, usable remaining space in the real physical world is shrinking incredibly fast.
And this brings us to a specific industry term you really need to understand to grasp the severity of this issue: tank tops. Tank tops is the critical situation where crude oil storage space completely runs out. It is the exact mechanical breaking point of the system. When a nation hits tank tops, the physical infrastructure literally cannot accept another single drop of oil. The pipes have nowhere to vent, the storage facilities are maxed out, and the entire system is pushed to the absolute brink.
So, the big question is, how close are they to that breaking point? 2 weeks. That is the strict time limit analysts have predicted before Iran hits tank tops. Now, it is worth noting the estimates do vary on this. For instance, President Trump remarked on Sunday that it would only take about 3 days for Iran's oil infrastructure to become completely blocked. But look, whether it's 3 days or 2 weeks, the overarching consensus is undeniable. The clock is ticking incredibly fast, and the window to find a physical solution is slamming shut.
Let's look at Section 3, fatal risks of halting production, the geological catch-22.
Now, you might be wondering, and it's a very obvious question, if you have absolutely nowhere to put the oil, why not just turn off the taps, right? Why not just stop producing until the blockade is over? It seems like the most logical, straightforward fix in the world. Well, this is exactly where we have to pivot from basic economics straight into the high-stakes, uncompromising science of geology. The answer lies in some really severe geological vulnerabilities. Stopping production simply isn't an option because we're dealing with incredibly old oil fields here. According to consulting firms, roughly half, about 50%, of Iran's oil fields suffer from low pressure and have very fragile underground geological structures. If you suddenly halt production, those delicate underground pressure dynamics can completely collapse. Without the constant outward flow of oil maintaining that pressure, the fragile subterranean rock structures literally cave in on themselves. The pathways just crush. So what does that actually mean in practice? It means if you shut the tap off today, you risk permanent, irreversible production loss. You might literally never be able to get that oil out of the ground again. The well is dead. So engineers are stuck.
They are forced to keep pumping oil they absolutely cannot sell into storage tanks that are already dangerously full.
Moving to our final section, Section 4, Desperate Rail Measures. A cornered system seeks an outlet.
When the ships can't sail and the tanks are full to the brim, a cornered system desperately looks for any kind of outlet it can find. The intent right now is to establish a massive overland rail supply line, connecting Tehran all the way to Yiwu and Xi'an in China. They're basically attempting to bypass the naval blockade entirely. But the reality of this measure is pretty grim. Transporting crude oil by rail over those massive continent-spanning distances is just highly inefficient. Just think about the sheer volume a single supertanker can hold, often around 2 million barrels. Trying to match that immense output with a train is a logistical nightmare, and it's absolutely not cost-effective. This isn't a sustainable, long-term economic strategy at all. It's a desperate measure that signals severe, acute distress within the infrastructure. And that brings us to a really crucial realization from the source material. Quote, "This attempt is more a signal that the system is cornered than a solution. What happens when global geopolitics breaks physical infrastructure?" You know, it's a fascinating and frankly, a somewhat terrifying question to leave you with today. We so often treat geopolitics as just a theoretical game of chess played out on a map. But as we've explored in this explainer, those political moves eventually collide with the undeniable, immovable realities of physical storage capacity and fragile geology. When the tanks hit the top and the underground pressure drops, the damage isn't just a political talking point anymore. It becomes a permanent physical reality. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. Definitely keep an eye on how this physical infrastructure battle unfolds over the coming weeks, because that clock is definitely ticking.